if there's no music with it, I think this film will be pale.
Predominantly experienced at this, having done 1,000 performances of music for film scores already. They perform regularly at the world's largest silent film festival, Le Giante del Cinema, Mutola in Portodone at the Bologans Cinema Ridovavo. He's a longtime member of the musician roster at both festivals and part of the masterclass faculty at Portodone, training upcoming pianists from all over the globe in the art of silent film accompaniment.
Hello, Mr. Donna. So we have already seen what your performance yesterday, and it was just fantastic.
Thank you.
So, could you tell us a lot of information about the film and your production? How is the music related to the silence film? Like, what's the process of picking up your pieces of music that relate to that film?
Good question. So, when I write music for a film, first I watch the film and make a lot of notes about what the action in the film is, what the characters are doing, and it's a long list usually which if anybody else read it would not make a lot of sense, because sometimes what I'm most interested in is when a scene ends and when somebody moves into a room or something like that. And then as I'm watching the film for the first time, if I'm planning this in advance, then some musical ideas are usually occurring to me, and then either I write them down in a notebook, or I might put them into my computer, or even if I'm thinking about it in my car, I turn on my phone and I'm humming some little tunes to work on later. Sometimes I don't get a chance at all to prepare. I was just in Italy at a festival in Pordenone, and every day each of the pianists, there are about 9 pianists, and myself have to play for whatever the films are, and sometimes there was no chance to see them ahead of time. So we sit in the pit, the film comes on the screen, and we just play. And so there's no preparation, there's no anything, it's just complete connection between the film and our mind and our fingers. And for that, it's just, we hope that it works out okay. In the best circumstance, there's a lot of preparation time, and then I'm writing themes, and I'm developing in them, and then I'm possibly recording them, and orchestrating them, and doing it the way any piece of music would be written.
Your production is a way to interpret the film. So how could you interpret the film? Like, you can catch the audience at every single moment. How could you do that? That's
many years of doing this. I've been writing film music since 1971. So after thousands of performances and many hundreds of films that I've worked on, some of them I've played for once and that was it. Some of them I have played for or recorded or written a score for many times. And you know, it's as with any profession, you get to know what you're doing after a while if you're any good. And I hope my music is good. So I have a very instinctual feel for how the music should work with the film, and I have to make a decision, and sometimes it's okay. Sometimes if I listen to it later on, I think, well, I should have done something different. You know, I saw one film, for example, a wonderful film called The Shakedown by William Wyler about a boxer. And when I first saw it, I had never seen it before, and I had to play for it. And so I chose some kind of, I don't know, sort of slow Gershwin kind of music. And then it turned out that I had misunderstood the character. And so when I went back after that, I made much different choices about the music that then I thought worked better with the film.
So why do you choose this instrument rather than traditional or common chamber example?
Right. So they told me that I could have 4 musicians. So I thought, well, what could I do? It's either a string quartet or some other kind of a quartet, a saxophone quartet maybe. But I thought it would be nice to have a mixture of instruments. And I've written other film scores and other chamber pieces which had a variety of instruments, a wind instrument, a brass instrument, some strings. And so I just thought, based on the characters in this film, that a trombone would be a good representation of Dr. Caligari, that I could have the trombone improvise as he's talking. And then the strings, when I had recorded a different version of this score 15 years ago, a lot of the music was written for strings. So I wanted to keep the strings as a facet of this score. Piano, because I'm a pianist, and then I wanted to be able to join that ensemble and play. And then the other instrument was clarinet and bass clarinet. I thought maybe French horn, but then we already had the trombone, so I thought a clarinet would be nice. It has a great deal of flexibility, and this particular musician, John Friedrichs, also plays bass clarinet, so it gave a very big range from low to high. Which was very useful in some of the more spooky parts of the film. Why the music is divided into different sections, partly because it's easier to do that than writing one long thing. Normally in a contemporary film you'd have much shorter cues. You might have a cue that was 30 seconds or 2 minutes. These cues go on for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. There's actually 4 sections, and I wrote them sometimes to correspond to the ends of the acts of the film. There are 6 acts in the film, but then I overlapped the acts in the middle of the sections because I wanted the music to continue. But it can be easier with measure numbers also, so that you're not counting 2,000 measures in each section. There are problems both ways, to combine it or not to combine it.
Did you compose this music for this silent film all by yourself?
Yeah, I wrote all the music myself, and I took the music that I had written and recorded. It started in 2002 really as an improvisation, the way a lot of my film music does, where I'm sitting and I'm watching the film and I'm just improvising and recording that in my computer and then going back and editing it, maybe changing it many times until I get it right. And then I listened to that over the summer and started adapting that for this ensemble. And so I got to a point where I realized there wasn't going to be enough time for me to orchestrate and change the music to make it for this ensemble. So I hired 2 other people to help me with that orchestration process, which is very common in film music, where there's a deadline and a lot of music to produce in a short time. So, but all the music was my own, yeah.
Do you think like all of the silence music are perfect to produce the music for them, or you just like certain kind of film that just match your music style?
I write all kinds of different music. What this music was in a very particular style for a German expressionist film. It's not, I can't even say that it's the style that I like writing in the most, but it happens that I have written for quite a number of German expressionist films. I've also written music for Asian films, for Japanese films by Ozu and Shimizu, and music for Chinese films, and French films and Italian films, and of course American and British films. And each one of these types of films, whether it's a comedy or a horror film or a documentary or whatever, they have their own particular necessities musically, and I seem to have a a good amount of flexibility in the way that I can write for films, choosing the style that works for that kind of film. So I approach every film as though it's a unique thing. I think it's fun to write for so many different kinds of films because it gives me a chance to experiment and not always get caught in the same style and the same rhythms and so forth. In terms of what I do best, I really don't know. I think that's up for the audience to judge.
So how do you get interested in creating this music for silent film? Is there any influence from the university?
Well, I actually started writing music for silent films at the University of Michigan in 1971 when I was a student there. And I was a composition student, but nobody was teaching film music at that point, nor were they teaching it at Columbia when I went to get my master's there. So there are wonderful courses now at the Berkeley School and at USC, and UCLA and other places, but I never took any of those courses. I just did everything on my own. I did as much research as I could. There's much more scholarship now, much more interested in film music as well as in old films as there was back when I was a student. And so I try to read the new material that's being written, and I also have the joy of listening to my colleagues and to watching other silent films from all over the world with new music and thinking about that and discussing that with my colleagues so that I can grow as an artist.
You often improvise on keyboard to silent film. How is creating a film score either easier or more difficult than that?
I love to improvise in general. Even when I was a child, I was improvising, and as well as practicing the classical pieces that I had. And that's always been a part of my musical life. So it was quite an interesting thing to get involved with films where I had the opportunity to keep improvising for a film and then take the emotions and take the actions and the rhythms of the film and then make that a part of my improvisation. So it's a little like I have to follow the roadmap of the film in front of me. I don't feel like I can just do whatever I want. I have to be respectful to the film, to try to think about what the wishes of the director might be. I do write contemporary film music, and so I'm always in a dialogue with the directors and discussing what the director wants, and sometimes it takes a lot longer to reach a mutual point of agreement with a director standing over you. So I like to joke that it's much more fun to work with directors that are dead.
What's your future plan? Do you plan to make more music for silent film all around the world, or just for a certain place?
I'm very fortunate that I have a very full schedule of performances and recordings to do silent films, as well as some other things, orchestra pieces and chamber music pieces, vocal pieces, choral pieces. And I write for the theater, and I write with my wife also, who was part of this performance last night. She and I write songs for silent films. She writes the lyrics and performs them, and then I'm writing the music and playing the piano. We have a number of different projects in the works right now. We're going to go to Canada in November, this is 2017, and do a film from 100 years ago. Looking into the future, there's a whole big project to score biograph films, some by Griffith and others, that's coming up sometime next year, a documentary. I teach master classes in Italy every year and in Denver in the spring. We'll be doing Hitchcock's film The Lodger next April, I think it is, in Denver, and I'll have a group of students there in a workshop for 3 days. And we'll be figuring out that music together and then performing it at the Denver Silent Film Festival. I'm going to be playing for Swedish Films in New York in late January. A restored version of Three Musketeers at the Museum of Modern Art also in January, and 6 melodramas, five or six melodramas at the end of December at Lincoln Center. So it's quite a full schedule, and I'm glad for a few days of rest after this big project before I start on the next one.
You were a student when starting to create your own music, and that's all for interest. And how about now? Do you enjoy every day of your life?
As taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, that gives me a great deal of stability and flexibility and rest and creativity twice a day, so that I can come out of meditation refreshed and feeling like a lot of new ideas are bubbling up. I'm very, very fortunate, as some of my other colleagues are, to do this as a way of keeping fresh and creative.